Susan, you're muted.
Of 2000.
Go ahead, Susan.
I apologize, I was on mute. Good morning and welcome to our first Bravo Leadership Conversation of 2021. Today, we have the great pleasure of hosting Mauricio Claver-Carone, President of the IDB, Inter-American Development Bank. Prior to joining the IDB as president last October, Mauricio served as Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States and Senior Director for the Western Hemisphere Affairs at the National Security Council. Previously, he served as the United States Executive Director at the IMF. Before we start, I want to thank our sponsors, Bank of America, the AES Corporation, MasterCard, Salesforce, SAP, Softtech, Chubb Latin America, Greenberg Traurig LLC, HSBC Securities, and our partners at the Inter-American Development Bank. And of course, I want to thank our Miami team for organizing this with its great leader, Maria Gallo. So without further ado, Mauricio, welcome to our Bravo Leadership Forum. You are launching the forum this year, and we are so happy to have you as partners and have you launch the event. I'd like to kick off the conversation. You've been at the IDB now since October. Could you tell us what your impressions are? What are your first impressions?
Yeah. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Susan. I'm honored to launch the Bravo series, and I'm honored to be here with you. And it's what a great opportunity to speak to everyone. It's been 4 months, over 100 days now since I assumed the presidency, and it's been really a great responsibility, a great challenge, but one that I see with great optimism. Look, I always knew and I had, that the IDB has tremendous potential, has the best staff of any multilateral in DC or frankly, I think anywhere. And my job here was to really bring to it a sense of empowerment and energy. I think that my campaign, when I ran, the fact that it was different because, I am from the United States, really brought a lot of attention to the IDB. I've always said that there was a bipartisan consensus here in the United States politics, whether it's administrations or in the executive or the legislative branch, in regards to the IDB, which is neither Democrats nor Republicans have paid attention to the IDB, nor given it the attention that it merits. I'm trying to create a whole different bipartisan consensus, and it's really just letting them know what the IDB can do and the huge potential. And by the way, the huge value proposition that the IDB is for taxpayers, because we can. Instead of, we can scale every dollar that comes into the IDB to have a greater impact. And by the way, in our 26 borrowing nations, we have probably the best relationships, the best teams, and really the ability to execute unlike anybody. So it's really, that I think that we had that opportunity. Look, I'm not. I'm neither made, as I always say, neither made out of gold nor chocolate. So, at the end of the day, there's some people that like me and some people that don't. But I think at the end of what I'm really trying to do is create a consensus around what, the different issues that we can have this consensus on, and really trying to get an investment of the United States into the IDB as a real source of development in the region and a real source of impact. And by the way, that goes also in regards to the private sector. I think one of the things that we've seen is there had been, kind of really a scaling down of the IDB as a guide to the private sector in the region. And that's why I think we've also seen a lot of this recalibration over the last 20, 30 years from Latin America to Asia. I think there's a lot of things there, but I think we have a unique opportunity to bring that back. And in these 4 months, we've been focused on bringing in our executive team. I think in the first month, I think we have an extraordinary executive team here. One of the things that I did was nominate for the executive vice president, which was traditionally the U.S. spot number 2, Reina Irene Mejia, who was the CEO of Citibank in Central America. She's Honduran. who that job is supposed to be the chief operating officer of the bank. One of the things that we want to leave institutionally is strengthen transparency and really try to create important buffers here in the banks and compliance standards, and to really be a results-based institution that measures performance and measures results. That's Reina's job. She is truly a COO, has tremendous experience, and has that unique ability of knowing the challenges in the region, but also knowing how financial institutions work and U.S. financial institutions work, and I think that's going to bring a lot of wealth to the bank in that sense. And so we're really pleased to have Reina with us in that role. By the way, she also happens to be the highest ranking Latin American woman in the 61-year history of the IDB, and I'm also very proud of that. We have two former finance ministers as vice president of sectors and vice president of countries. Vice president of countries is Richard Martinez, who was the finance minister of Ecuador, who led probably one of the most complex debt restructurings of the last couple of years. And there's few people, and I first met Richard when I was at the IMF, and he came knocking on doors and really did an extraordinary job. He negotiated 3 IMF programs, negotiated with private bondholders, earned the respect of the United States and China. There's not many people that you can kind of say that about in that regards. And Richard is an extraordinary asset, and we're really pleased to have him. And for Vice President of Sectors, Benigno Lopez, who was finance minister in Paraguay, had been managing director of Iguazu, the central bank, head of the Social Security Institute, just a well-rounded, extraordinary human being. And that worked together. And then we promoted our CFO, Gustavo La Rosa, who is a legend here, extraordinarily well-respected in the markets, had formerly been from ING, in as our vice president of finance, and he's doing all sorts of very creative things with financial instruments here in the IDB. That team together, working together, one of the things that we're also doing is really breaking silos here. And breaking those silos, one of the first things that we did, and I'm really proud of, is really identify and reassign $1 billion that we dedicated to vaccines for the entire infrastructure of vaccines, to ensure that all the contingencies were looked at so that the countries, because at the end of the day, we can't start it. There is a correlation between recovery and the vaccines, and we wanted to ensure that we were doing everything possible. That would have been impossible in the past had it not been for breaking these silos and this team working together to identify $1 billion, which is not small potatoes, literally from everything that we had going on. It's not additional money, it's not new, but we literally put it all back together, and the team deserves a lot of credit for that. And by the way, we also got hit, and I'll shut up now. I know I ramble and I talk too much. In regards to, obviously, we got hit by the 2 hurricanes. We're really proud of the response on Eta and Iota. In 2 weeks in a row, I think we led with the other multilaterals. We really kind of led the initial response and have been working on the assessments. And now we will be soon announcing the recovery effort, kind of the reconstruction portion of that work on those 2 hurricanes for the countries in Central America.
Well, thank you very much. And I know all of your leadership team, and they're amazing. So congratulations on putting them in place and breaking down the silos. So 2020, was a really challenging year, and 2021 is going to be equally challenging, if not more so. How do you see the opportunities? And I'm going to combine 2 questions. And with that, opportunities and the challenges kind of fit how we can get people vaccinated in Latin America, because without vaccinations, there is going to be no return to growth and prosperity.
Yeah. So this is precisely why this is one of the first things that, no one had expected this from us. And we literally sat down and said, hey, look, there's going to be a correlation between the speed of recovery and the vaccination. So there were 6 countries initially that had asked us for help in regards to not only the acquisition of the vaccines, but also in regards to like the distribution, you have storage, transportation, et cetera. And then one issue that we really were concerned about is also in regards to the accessibility of the vaccine, to make sure that there's an equitable distribution and that it doesn't become a political tool or anything of the sort for vulnerable populations, et cetera. That's now been expanded to 8 countries since we launched this $8 billion. And there's things that we're doing, for example, in Argentina, Belize, Ecuador, Trinidad, we've helped them finance down payments for vaccine purchases through the COVAX facility. And by the way, kudos to the Biden administration I think it was a really good move to incorporate the United States into the COVAX effort. That's going to help a lot. That was the right thing to do, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. And I think it's a game changer in that sense. In the Dominican Republic, for example, we've been using a contingent credit facility to like modify kind of some of the costs in regards to not only the down payments but also the capacity building in that sense. And look, all together, what I wanted to make sure was that we had this the $1 billion not only to cover those 8 countries that needed the help, but ensure that there was any contingencies covered, therefore, so there wouldn't be any excuses moving forward. In developed countries, there's challenges in regards to vaccines and vaccine distribution that we're seeing, and you can only imagine, obviously, in the region. That's also why it is the most disproportionately impacted. It's 8% of the world's population, yet about 30% of the world's deaths. So the impact has been extraordinarily hard. So we wanted to make sure to step up, and that's what we're doing. That $1 billion for vaccine is in addition to the $1.2 billion that we already had committed forward in regards to public health measures. But overall, and I said it the other day at the World Economic Forum, I mean, the needs of the region in regards to healthcare are about $150 billion. So it's not any small potatoes. And to give you kind of the proportion of that and the impact of that, we feel that probably about 70% of deaths in the region could have been prevented with adequate healthcare. So this has a huge impact, and therefore some of the disproportion that we've seen. So we are stepping up to the plate, and obviously doing so in partnership with others.
So that's great. When you look at the vaccination schedule, do you think that we can expect Latin American to be vaccinated during the course of 2021, 2022? Quickly, what's your view on that?
Yeah, so the goal is obviously the spring and the summer. It's a goal everywhere. We are not we're not the Pan American Health Organization. We'll work with the Pan American Health Organization and WHO, and we're working with the countries and their health ministries to do so. What we want to make sure is that from the financing side and from the monetary side, that there's no excuses for everything that can be done to be done, and that's what we're doing with those 8 countries and many more. Because obviously we're working on different education campaigns as well in regards to the vaccination. Our commercial in Uruguay is probably the most popular commercial in regards to prevention, and then now obviously turning the page in regards to vaccination. We're working with Chile as well on the education campaigns, El Salvador on the education campaigns, on the importance of the vaccine, because that's going to be a big effort as well on the education side. So we are doing everything possible from the financial side in order to ensure that the countries themselves, and by the way, and also in dealing with the private sector, we've been working. We created a task force, and we've been working with the countries in their negotiations. So there's the COVAX facility, but we're not essentially just betting on that, but helping them also in their bilateral negotiations with some of these pharmaceutical companies, so that they have all the contingencies covered. So we sit here and think about what can go wrong, how, et cetera, and we try to cover that, because again, there is going to be a correlation between the vaccination and a true pivot towards recovery, and we want to make sure that that happens as quickly and efficiently as possible.
So you mentioned, and you actually, in working on your candidacy, you talked about job creation and how important that was going to be and the role of the IDB in job creation. How will you work with the private sector to achieve this goal?
Yeah. So look, private sector, we can do a lot, right? But at the end of the day, the recovery in the region is going to be led by private sectors. I've said before, I think one of the good news stories, and we had a forum with the health ministers from 5 countries in the region, and everybody agrees. Obviously, a success story of public-private partnerships has been the vaccine production, the creation of the vaccine. The success of the region is going to be based on PPPs, and in that sense, I mean public-privect partnerships. But by the way, the complete flip side is also could be PPPs. But if we focus on, I say in jest, politics, power, and patronage, right? So we need to focus on the right PPP, which is public-private partnerships, and I think that the vaccine process has been indeed a success story and one that seeks that I think we can emulate across the sphere. Job creation is essentially our number one priority right now. 25 million jobs in the region have been lost in regards to the pandemic, and nothing has a greater socioeconomic impact on people's lives than a job and a formal job. But then again, I can go through, and I've said, our goal now is for the IDB to be a results-based institution and to be able to measure success and performance in doing so, but in so being, what we've been focusing on are now what are the opportunities, right? So, and I've said it a million times, 25 million people have lost their jobs, 35 million people are going to enter poverty, over 50 million people are leaving the middle class in Latin America as a result of the pandemic. You have this mix of COVID, worst hurricane season in 50 years, with 4 out of 5 countries most affected in the world in Central America and the Caribbean. You have the worst migration crisis in the world with Venezuela affecting all the countries in South America, in the Caribbean, creating huge fiscal social pressure. So that is unique across the world in that mix of challenges. Now, where are the opportunities? That's what we see our role in, which is why we presented to our board our Vision 2025. And that Vision 2025 is not just about diagnostics. So there's a lot of people that do diagnostics, but is where are those opportunities? Where can we focus on, and where can the private sector focus on? Look, number one, obviously, nearshoring and integration, huge. And we're going to go through more of these and everything. I'll give it just quickly so I don't consume all the time talking about each of them.
That's okay.
But one, obviously, nearshoring and integration. That's going to be huge. And it's not about the IDB creating any type of geopolitical drama. No, that's not about us. It's about a reality in that regard. So, there's a survey this year from Gartner that said about a third of the leading 250 global companies are planning to move part of their chains out of China by 2023. I don't want any part of the world or any country in the world to benefit more from that than my 26 borrowing nations. That's who I work for. I have 26 clients. It's those countries here in the region. I would love for those companies to set up their plants in the region. That would have a huge impact per se. Just think about this. And if Latin America were simply to capture 15% of what the U.S. already imports from its top 10 sources outside of the Western Hemisphere, that would increase the export of goods from the region by $72 billion per year. $72 billion per year. Huge impact in the region. And now imagine that, new opportunities, like just in the textile. We're talking obviously about Central America, and President Biden is obviously working on creating a task force and looking at the root causes. Just in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, which is it's a $46 billion. We have here in the United States a $46 billion of imports in textiles in that regards. If the countries in that region, if Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador simply captured 10% of that market, it would increase their exports more than fourfold. Now, talk about creating jobs. Talk about dealing with the root causes. There's lots we can do in that regards, and that reality because of this. And by the way, and Susan, you've been a leader, and Eric's been a leader. We've always heard in the 1990s, et cetera, about free trade area of the Americas and integration and Pan-Americanism. We've always heard that, but the reality was at that time, we were seeing the offshoring to Asia and China. Now we kind of everything is uniting. We have not only the political rhetoric, but we have the corporate will. As I said in this survey, and we've seen it in many surveys, of the reality as a result of the pandemic and as a result of the lessons learned of the pandemic, of companies seeking to increase and be more efficient to reduce distances, transportation costs. Now, there's a lot of things that need to be done about that, and we can have a whole conversation on that. We can do it, but I won't go too. I get excited about these things. To digitalization. Look, digitalization is huge. The pandemic forced the region to focus on digitalization. We've seen huge increases. I call it Tele3, like a channel in Latin America. Teleworking, telemedicine, teleeducation. The pandemic has forced the region to move in these. We saw over a 60% increase in teleeducation in the region. We saw a 300% increase in telework in the region. And in telemedicine, Colombia just Colombia had a 7,000% increase in telemedicine, which had a huge impact in that regards. That needs to become now more institutionalized. Now that focuses then, when we talk about infrastructure, on digital infrastructure. So now there's some recalibrations that need to be made in regards to that. But the huge impact that can be had, particularly now looking at connectivity, accessibility, et cetera. So that's huge, and that's number 2. 3, SMEs. SMEs are huge. There's a huge disconnect in the region in regards to SMEs. It's 99% of all business in the region are SMEs, but yet they account for only 25%. And by the way, it's over 60% of all formal jobs, but they account only for about 25% of GDP in the region. But that's a number one opportunity to get those jobs, those formal jobs, in fact, SMEs. But the financing gaps are huge, so we need to work on those in that sense. And I see obviously that for climate. There we're looking to have a green growth or green recovery, and as I say to our European shareholders, a green capital increase, because there's a lot we can do in renewables in that sense in the region. And by the way, we're looking to create our own climate facility so we can be have more initiatives in that regards, and also the Amazon shit. And then I'll shut up with the fifth. The fifth is obviously gender framework, which falls into SMEs, and we could talk about more of these later on, but I don't want to consume all the time.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I wanted to follow up on SMEs, because one of the reasons that they haven't been as successful as they should be, and they're not as productive as large companies, is they have no access to financing, because most countries, as you know, don't have very high bankerization rates. Now, one of the things that's interesting is the rise of fintech, particularly during this period, and the leapfrogging effect. So what are your plans to try to help these SMEs get more financing and make themselves more productive so that they can compete and do all the things you just discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I think you identified the problem. Like there's about $1 trillion financing gap in regards to SMEs, and the reality is among women-led SMEs, which by the way happen to be the most successful, 70% of those that apply for credit don't get it.
Global problem. Excuse me for interrupting.
It's a global problem, but here in the region is where the largest.
It's worse. I agree.
It's over 85 billion. So it's a global problem, and here in the region is even worse.
Absolutely.
In regards, particularly to the financing gap. But yet here in the region is actually really interesting, because here in the region, of any women-led SMEs have 10% greater income than those owned by men. So they're the most successful entrepreneurs in the region. But yet they have 50% less access to credit in that sense. And by the way, they're actually the least credit risk per se as well. So something doesn't, match up here. Look, I've said this, incorporation of women in the workforce, their access to financing is not just a human rights issue, because it is, and it's fully consumed, but it's an economic issue. This has a very real impact on GDP. It has a real impact on growth in the region, and there's a lot we can do there. I mean, we need to ensure, and this is where this is where our partnership with private financial institutions, play a big role, and we're able to mobilize more money. So we're working with banks throughout the region, and by the way, this is another. Reina Irene was a champion for this in Central America and Citibank, and at the end of the day,
I know.
We need to now scale this regionally to ensure that we are focused as part of our gender focus and our framework, because of it's a rights issue and an economic issue, to work with these banks in the region so that they can also scale up our partnerships in that regards. And by the way, that has a quick impact. That's a very fast impact. One of the things that when we identified the 5 opportunities and the vision that we presented to the board, and it's much more very thorough. We focus, because the bank does 100 things. It's amazing. But we really focused on where we can literally put our head down and we would have the biggest short-term impact. And this is one of those things that when we work with financial institutions in the region, whether it's through IDB Invest or through, as a group, this has the financing of these businesses, the access to financing of small, medium-sized businesses has an immediate impact, because it's an immediate way that people can help get their businesses off and going. And that's one of our big focuses, because we want to have an impact tomorrow, because the region needs to have an impact tomorrow.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, we've talked about SMEs. We've also talked about the private sector. The challenge coming out of this is just enormous, and it is going to present many challenges that require multi-sectoral solutions. What's the role of the private sector, and how can you encourage the private sector to take some of the risks that they're not going to need to take to invest in the region?
Yeah. So look, this is where we play a big role, and I think a role that had dissipated over the last decades. I think that my goal, and I said it was not only for the IDB to be a champion of nearshoring integration, but also a champion of the private sector. It's going to be a private sector-led growth in the region. I think that one of the things that, and I said that my candidacy, obviously, as an American, one of the things that I could bring to the bank, and one of the things I want to institutionally leave the bank, is really strengthening the relationship with the U.S. and regional private sector, kind of reigniting that interest. And I hear every day from U.S. companies, financial institutional investors that had really left the region over the last few decades now are really interested in how we can help them get back in the region. And so one of the things we're going to do on February 16th, we're launching a new partnership. There's about 24 of the biggest U.S. and regional companies. If any of you are out there, and I'm sure you've got invitations, but if you're interested, let us know, to create an ongoing partnership. I think what we've seen a lot of these one-offs where, like, hey, we sign an MOU with this company and we do this one-off project and we get a tweet, hey, we're great, everybody's, it's all PR, right? We want to have an ongoing partnership so that therefore we incorporate the private sector and what you're seeing into our work. We're dividing, having sector task forces to find those opportunities to do the matchmaking. Look, we're beefing up our American business dialogue. We're beefing up Connect Americas. We're doing a whole bunch of different things in new platforms, but we're going to really incorporate the private sector into the work we're doing to help them find opportunities. And that buzz we're creating is very real. I get phone calls, and you'll hear some on February 16th, chief investment officers saying, hey, I want to take $1 billion from this region and looking for opportunities in Latin America and the Caribbean. Can you help us identify and see what the challenges and opportunities are? Absolutely. Give me a phone call. Hey, we're moving our facility from this country to this country in the region. This is great. Fantastic. You need any help? I'm going to be that broker. We're going to be that matchmaker. We see that as part of our role, because at the end of the day, it has a huge development impact. It has a huge impact in creating jobs, and the region needs it more than ever, and the opportunity exists more than ever. So I don't want to let that pass by, and that's why we're going to be champions and are being champions of the private sector. So count on us, and everybody out there. If you have any issue in the region or looking for opportunities, my email is mauricio@iadb.org. Send me an email, and we'll make that matchmaking happen, because that's exactly what we want.
Thank you very much. So let me ask you a different question, because I know that there are a lot of companies that would like to move facilities back to the hemisphere, are super interested in the nearshoring opportunity, super interested in investing. It helps create more productive flow, and it's good business. But a lot of companies also complain about the actual investment environment in some of the countries. And so what role is the IDB going to be taking as an advisor to countries about the investment climate so we can make all of this happen?
Yeah. So look, our one of the biggest assets that the IDB has is the confidence that it has in the countries, our presence in our 26 borrowing nations. And we work very closely with all of the governments in order to give them our best advice, our fair advice in regards to how they can improve the business environment. I think there's some broader issues overall in the region, and there's some structural issues that have obviously been impediment in the past, like trade costs. Like we know that trade costs in Latin America are 60% higher than those in Asia, and so we got to work on some of those structural things and freight costs, et cetera, and also the harmonizing of, there's like over 40 intra-hemispheric trade agreements, and I think that just harmonizing those complex trade agreements, that could be over that's a $20 billion impact right there, just harmonizing those 40+ trade agreements. So I think there's a lot of things we can do in that sphere and work with these countries. I think some countries are really doing the right thing, and they're being leaders. And I think that they will then be examples to emulate. And that's one of the things that we hope to also do. But I think there's something that's broader here. I don't think, we can remember any time in the region, 30, 40 years ago, when you talked about FDI in the region, it was kind of like there was almost kind of some countries had a concern. It was kind of an ideological thing, right? It was like, back to the, United Fruit Company or something, right? Like it was straight out of the textbook. Today, we have a huge opportunity that it is non-ideological. There's an ideological consensus, like we were talking about bipartisan consensus here. There's an ideological consensus that foreign direct investment and U.S. foreign direct investment has a positive impact in countries. So whether you're the left, center, right, or right, you can agree, whether it's President Fernandez and López Obrador of Mexico or President Piñera and Duque of Chile and Duque of Colombia, President Bolsonaro by Brazil, they all want foreign direct investment because it creates jobs. It has an impact on populations. So
Absolutely.
The fact that there's a consensus of how this investment is good is a huge step forward. Because we're at least taking the politics are out of it, right? Now we got to dive in and look at how to fix how to help in the countries, how to help create the environment, the regulatory environment, obviously tax environment, etc. And that's things that we work with every day from a knowledge and technical assistance perspective. But hey, that's the easy part. But look, we're even looking to take a step forward. We're looking to launch in Barranquilla a toolkit, an entire toolkit for nearshoring, so that we can help the private sector not only in finding those opportunities, but how we can even also provide some incentives in order to relocate to the region, so that we essentially kind of the entire textbook of how we can work with companies to do so, not only from the knowledge side, but also even from the investment and financing side.
One of the things that you said, you talked about harmonization of trade agreements, also harmonization of investment regulations and tax policy so that e-commerce can continue to grow and grow cross-border, and the digital environment can continue to grow and cross-border. Big opportunity.
Susan, you're exactly right. And not only that, so look, I get constructive criticism from our European shareholders when I talk about nearshoring, because they're concerned. Like, obviously, they don't want it to be any type of geopolitical. And I say I'm not creating geopolitical divide. I'm just making sure that in a reality that the region is benefiting from it. But that said, I also say we're also jealous. We're jealous because 65% of Europe's commerce is intra-regional, 55% of Asia's commerce is intra-regional, and only 15% of the region's commerce is intra-regional. So the opportunities right here, and also that's also a cultural shift for the region. Stop looking out. Like, let's look right here. And if all of that unites, and the pandemic ironically helps that, and I've talked a lot about it, and people, I obsessed over the holidays, and I've said this now a couple of times. I obsessed over the holidays in studying like the Middle Ages and the bubonic plague and the Renaissance after, and like the whole labor mobility and the innovation and the consumption, everything that took place. Hey, there's a lot of similarities here. I really think the region can have a renaissance here if all of these things come together. And I think that we got to look at the opportunities because they're there and they're real. And maybe ironically, this horrible pandemic is the instigator for this long overdue recalibration.
Thank you. I think what we'll do, Mauricio, if it's okay with you, is we'll take a couple of questions from the floor and then we'll come back. So Andres Gluski, you have the first question. If you could unmute your phone and come on up on the screen. You're muted, Andres.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, but we can't see you.
Okay, 1 second. Got it here. All right, excellent. Well, Mauricio, that was a very exciting vision. It's hard not to get excited about this. So I just have one comment and one question because you've touched so many issues. The comment is, I think on the nearshoring, one argument I haven't heard in the States is the region's marginal propensity to import American. So in other words, if Mexico, exports to the States and receives dollars, it's going to import things from the States. if China exports to the States, its marginal propensity to import American goods is virtually zero. And so that's a great argument, that you're making, for this nearshoring. So I guess you already answered a lot of this, but maybe if you could give us a little bit more color on this sort of green initiative that you have for the region and how the IDB will get involved. But so thank you very much.
Hey, thanks so much for the question. Look, I've talked a lot about where we can create bipartisan consensus here in the United States in regards to the IDB. And by the way, I see climate as one of those issues, and because it's a huge opportunity. I'm fully committed, and that's why it's in our Vision 2025 as one of those priorities. I'm fully committed to green growth, green recovery, and like I tell our European friends, and hopefully a green capital increase so that we can do even more. One of the things that I noticed right away, we have our climate team is the best in the business, the best of any multilateral. Juan Pablo Bonilla and his team are extraordinary. And, we are going to launch in Barranquilla our Amazon initiative, which, by the way, also uniquely is kind of a follow-on to the Leticia Pact, which is the only kind of agreement that has that brings the 7 Amazon countries together. And it's a wonderful tool because what we can do there as the IDB is implement a lot of projects directly, biodiversity projects, renewable projects, et cetera, in those countries with the buy-in of those countries without all the politics of it. And I think that's really important. So we're looking forward to that now in Barranquilla. We talked about actually President Duque, Vice President Morao from Brazil, and myself. We talked about it at the World Economic Forum. We're excited about launching the Amazon initiative in Barranquilla. But and climate here has been a mainstream issue. So in everything we do, there is a climate question. But we actually don't have our own business line in regards to climate. So I'm looking to create, one of the first things that I said when I came here, we need to create our own business line because we have knowledge of the region and we see opportunities in the region for biodiverse projects, renewables, et cetera, that no one else does. But we don't have our own funds to do so. We actually have to crotch off the Global Environment Fund, the GCF, et cetera, which are great, but somewhat inefficient, takes a lot of time, and we're here, next year we're going to, no, we need to be agile. If we're going to be effective and we're going to really have a green recovery, we need to be agile. So we need to have our own climate facility, which is what we're seeking, and we've already discussed with our shareholders. By the way, talking about a bipartisan consensus here in the United States, and this is a great opportunity for President Biden. Look, we can do that here as well. In that the legislation that was presented on the Hill in a bipartisan way by Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Menendez and Senator Rubio in regards to a historic capital increase for the bank actually calls for an environmental facility here for the bank. So we can now, between the administration and the IDB and now Congress under Rubio, Senator Menendez, we can talk about these issues in an important way. And one of the things that I said that why we can talk about these issues differently is also, look, I'm a Floridian. I'm from Miami. I've seen climate impact. I grew up, I've seen the changes in Biscayne Bay. This is a reality for me. So it's not a political issue for me. And we all know it's a reality in the region and it's a priority and we're keen to make it so. And by the way, we had a meeting with our non-regional governors last week, where we announced we're going to lead amongst the multilaterals in being aligned to Paris. We are working on being aligned to Paris, and we're going to lead all multilaterals in this regard as well. And I'm very proud of that because it's very real. Now, you and I talked about some important opportunities in the past, which I think are very real as well. How do we get as part of the nearshoring integration, et cetera, in the renewals, how do we get the production of those solar panels, the batteries, et cetera? How do we get that to the region? I am not ashamed to say here publicly, I prefer infinitely for solar panels to be produced in any country, in any of the 26 borrowing nations of the IDB than in China. So how do we make that happen? Let's sit down and let's find ways to do so. I think that's an incredible opportunity to really change the game and also to further have a development impact in regards to our green initiatives in this regards. There's also an integration aspect of it, and so that's another vehicle that we're looking to do. Look, a lot of those minerals that are required for renewables, et cetera, are right here in the region. So there's so many common sense things that if we just can break through some of those impediments, we can really build upon and have a great impact. And I would love to continue those conversations with you because I would love to encourage you to do so as well.
Oh, we'll do our part. Thank you very much. Huh?
Deal. See, we already made a deal.
That's perfect. This is great. We love deals. So we have several questions about the capital increase. And do you believe the U.S. will support the capital increase? And when do you foresee getting a capital increase to support all of your different plans and projects? We probably have 5 questions around that.
Yeah. Hey, look. I formed part of a panel last week, which had IMF, World Bank, ECLAC, everybody, and they talked about it. It was a Marshall Plan, and by the way, the Spanish government, President Sanchez, really got together the leaders of the region and said we need like a Marshall Plan for Latin America. Let me be clear, like the only Marshall Plan that's out there for Latin America is called the capital increase for the IDB. That's the reality. And by the way, it's the best value proposition. The legislation presented by Senator Menendez and Senator Rubio would be an $80 billion capital increase. The reality is this: in 2020, we were able to provide a record $21.6 billion to the region in financing. That was because of a lot of front loading that we did in times of emergency, and we really accelerated things there towards the end. But there's going to be a whiplash. We're going back. We're going back to our 12 to 16 tops levels of financing. And that's going to have an impact in the region, because the region, as we've heard, and as we can clearly detail, needs a lot more help and needs a lot more support. So the reality is that there is going to be a Marshall Plan version. And by the way, it's also the best value proposition for taxpayers. For every dollar in paid in capital that we have, we can scale that tenfold, right? So, the Biden administration is talking about a 4-year, $4 billion plan for the countries, for the Northern Triangle countries. We're all for it. We want to help. We want to be leaders on that. But hey, I'll give you a great value proposition. In that regards, it only takes $400 million in paid in capital for the IDB to be able to scale that to $4 billion. So talk about saving taxpayer money as well. And by the way, in implementation, we can have an extraordinary impact. I'm very excited about it, and this is a good caveat in that regards. We saw the executive order. Obviously, President Biden signed an executive order, which part of it is a task force looking at the root causes. I think that Alliance for Prosperity, we are not only willing and able, but we're ready and have plans to look at a 2.0. I think that one of the things that can make the Alliance for Prosperity all the more effective is to incorporate the private sector. Initially it was very public sector heavy. I think then the previous administration went in and it was, there's 3 agreements that were done with the DFC that are there that need to be implemented. $1 billion for each country. So the DFC did $1 billion with El Salvador, $1 billion with Guatemala, $1 billion with Honduras for private sector investment. If we put that all together, plus what we can do at the IDB, and plus if we have more resources to do so, we can have a huge impact. I mean, so the framework is there, the blueprint is there, and we can do quite a bit. But the reality is that the region is going to need that sustained support moving forward in order to recover, so that we don't have another lost decade, which is why we call their Vision 2025 a decade of opportunity. And look, we're going to be doing all sorts of things, this year and next year, while this capital discussion is taking place, in order to optimize our balance sheet, to mobilize more resources. We're very proud. We just recently did now an exposure exchange agreement with the Asian Development Bank in order to facilitate more resources. Our fundraising is going well. We just launched our 10-year sustainable bond, which was the best. It was actually the best fundraising we've ever had, the best 10-year bond we've ever had. We thought we were going to raise about $2 billion. We ended up having demand for $5 billion, settled on $4 billion, over 100 investors. The fact that there are more investors out there, institutional investors and others, looking for sustainable investments, that's like a big field. That has a huge impact, and that helps us a lot, and also saves taxpayers money if we can come to some sort of agreement. So this is a unique time. One of our directors, the executive director for Peru here at the bank has said, and it's stuck to me because he's right. And this is something I campaigned on. We had the foresight of seeing this happen and the needs that were going to be there, and how the bank can be a unique player to satisfy that. And you said, if not now, when, and if not us, who? And that's why we need those resources. And then let me finish on this point. The United States, because you asked the question, will the United States participate? Look, the United States has for decades, a bipartisan mistake of not participating or being dragged into capital increases in the past. In 2010, it essentially only approved really a capital increase to focus on Haiti. didn't do anything else. It really tied the hands. Like the United States dragged in, they didn't want to do it, and then Congress even less. In 2015, when there was the merge out of IDB Invest, the United States didn't participate. And the shareholding actually went down to actually create room for China in that sense. China's a shareholder, and we work with China, and we respect in that regards, and this is not a geopolitical issue. But the reality is this: if the IDB is the lender of preference of the region, and if the IDB doesn't step up and have the resources to do so, the region is going to look for alternatives. It has looked for alternatives in the past, and if we don't step up now, it's going to look for alternatives in the future. So it behooves the United States, and it behooves the United States Congress to support a capital increase for the bank. Hopefully, we've learned from the mistakes of the past, whereby the United States was absent or refused to in a bipartisan way, and now in a bipartisan way can actually choose to embrace its role in the IDB, embrace the opportunities that this presents, embrace the partnership that we have, and embrace the bipartisan consensus that we can create to truly have an impact on the region, not only with a capital increase, but then scaling up with everything we're doing with the private sector. I mean, this could be the first real Marshall Plan for the region since the Alliance for Progress.
Thank you very much. Gerardo Rodriguez from BlackRock has a question. Gerardo. Unmute, Gerardo. You're on mute. Gerardo? We can't hear you. So I have your question and I'll answer it. Ask it if we can't hear you. How is the IDB, this is Gerardo's question. I apologize, Gerardo, we got to keep going. How is the ID planning to deal with the increased belligerence against private sector investment in strategic sectors throughout the region, energy in Mexico, everything in Argentina, threats in Ecuador to undo existing financial arrangements, et cetera?
Look, one of like I said, one of the strengths of the IDB is the confidence that we have with our borrowing nations. I work for I work for Mexico, I work for Argentina, I work for Ecuador, I work for the United States. I work for all 48 of our shareholders, and when we give them advice, we do so privately, we do so in confidence, and we do so obviously looking for the well-being of those countries. So in that sense, we're cognizant, obviously, of what we hear from the private sector, and obviously we want all the countries to succeed, and we give them fair, honest, objective, and constructive advice, and we will continue to work closely with them as shareholders, as of the bank, in order to see how they can continue to work with the private sector to create jobs, have development impact, and create more opportunities, and serve, reduce poverty, and have an important impact in their countries.
So Judy Brown from Rio Tinto asks, what is your view of the role of mining in the economic recovery? The size of these projects are huge catalysts for development if done right. How do you view your involvement in that sector? But also, how do we create downstream mineral opportunities so that we're not just exporting the minerals?
That's right. That's a great question. We're actually working on our sectors team, and Benigno is working on a mining framework, so an extractive industries framework overall, to see how we can work more closely with. Look, there's been a lot of lessons learned over decades, and companies, whether it's Rio, Vale, others have really learned how to work with the communities. We've heard all the negative stories, but there's a lot of good stories now to tell. We've seen like communities that have been integrated and have worked with these companies in order to be essentially a part of these industries, and the impact that they have, and the job creation, and the positive impact they have for the communities, et cetera. The IDB plays an important role in that. We want to continue that role in that because we do see it as a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for the region. And by the way, if we're going to look into having green recovery, you can't have it, always over, right? Like we're going to focus in regards to, green growth, green recovery, green eventually green capital increase, et cetera. Those minerals are going to be important, right? And the processing of those minerals are going to be important. And so there's an entire, stream there that we need to strengthen and work with. I think that as we move in that direction, that industry is going to be all the more important. The way it works with the governments and those communities, and the way that it has a development impact is going to be all the more important. The IDB is proudly a partner, and we're looking to increase and strengthen the partnerships with these companies to ensure that they're having a positive development impact and working with those communities, and how we can help in that regards. And that's going to be what this framework is all about. And we look forward to working with Rio as we are with other companies in the sector.
So the next question is from Francisco Rios from IE Singapore. He says, thank you for your views. How do you see the IDB's role as a catalyzer of innovation and technology in Latin America? In particular, which opportunities do you see where you can work together with Asian countries to leverage on their capabilities in innovation and tech? A great question.
Yeah. So it's a great question and a great challenge for the region, right? We've seen that, one of the biggest problems that there's been in the region is obviously there's been very little investment in innovation in that sense. In many ways, what we're looking at in the region now is essentially how we, focusing in on literally connectivity, right? And then accessibility, affordability, et cetera. But there needs to be greater investment as well on innovation. The region lags behind other regions of the world in regards to investment in innovation, and that's something that we need to scale up. But I just had yesterday the Minister of Telecommunications from Ecuador was here, and we talked about this potential of creating a fund for rural connectivity. But it goes beyond this, and I think it goes to the point. The region historically, and we saw this even during the commodities boom, all of that income that came from the commodities boom was across the board almost in the region was misspent. It was spent on, populist programs, et cetera, where essentially, the money didn't have as much effect. Very little was invested in infrastructure. Latin American Caribbean is the region in the world that invests the least in infrastructure. But now within the sphere of infrastructure, and with the recovery and with the pandemic and with the impact and everything, that all the opportunities that we're seeing, and whether it's the Tele3, right, education, work, medicine, et cetera, a question is raised, how do we first and foremost, ensure that countries double their investment in infrastructure per se, but then what percentage of that should be digital infrastructure? Because there we can have the biggest impact. Do we invest money in building a bridge, a cement bridge that takes 5 years? Or do we invest money in creating a digital bridge that takes 5 days or 5 months, right? And I think in that regard, we're now working in creating, trying as part of those infrastructure investments to trying to focus a lot more in on how we create, which can be done fairly quickly. And in Barranquilla, we're going to announce some pretty ambitious goals by 2025 for overall connectivity, and then obviously broadband connectivity to help foster and foment that innovation. Look, Asia plays an important role. Obviously, Japan is the largest non-regional shareholder of the IDB. Korea is also an important member. Obviously, China is a member, and I think that we there's a lot more that we can do. They want to actually increase their role, and we're working on ways to do so. The digital sphere, innovation sphere, is obviously a key to that, and I think that there's a lot of creative things that we can do. From our part in the IDB, one of the first things that we are doing institutionally is ensuring that the digital infrastructure is there so that we can invest more and have more success in that realm.
So there were other people that kind of asked the same question, including Angel Mestizo from AT&T had talked about the digital supply chain, which is going to be, so important as well for nearshoring. But we're running out of time, so I want to I mean, we have probably 10 more questions, so this means we're going to have another conversation, I hope.
And also, I have to say, like, that's key. That's key, and that's why the digital infrastructure is key. We are working with the countries in setting up these. They need modern regulatory frameworks for this.
Absolutely,
I think that's going to be the key, and to expand the access and use of this. It's going to be the challenges. Are access is the biggest challenge. We're working on that, and I think that we've made a lot of progress. I think that the pandemic is going to be a great instigator of that, and we created these like test beds in Argentina, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. I think that we're making a lot of progress in this field, but this is going to be key to the future. And I think, ironically, hopefully in a good way, is one of those, and that's why it's one of our 5 focuses, one of those key opportunities that the pandemic has forced and will provide.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. And so, as I said, we have lots more questions on tourism, on the Caribbean, et cetera, for another time. But I'm going to ask you, before we finish, we always like to ask our participants in the Bravo Leadership Conversations about leadership. So for you, the pandemic has been the ultimate leadership test. I mean, you came into your job at this very historic moment in the world and in Latin America. Do you have advice for leaders navigating in these uncertain times? What have you learned, and what advice can you give?
Focus on the opportunities. I mean, at least for me. I mean, look, I'm no one to give advice. I am me. For me, I'm a glass half full person. And when I came in here, and I think it's why, look, I think we've kind of a huge amount of the staff here is really brought in, and they're energized because they see the sense of purpose. I don't want to be another diagnostics agency. Like, I don't want to be the guy that goes out there and says, GDP is going to contract so and so. There's there's tons of people that can do that. Our job is to find solutions and opportunities and to take the risks. I've told everyone here, think big. Let's take risks, because at the end of the day, if we don't do so, more of the same is not going to get us through this. We've done a lot of good things over 60 years, but those recipes of the past are not going to get us through this historic pandemic. Let me just put this in premise. This is the worst socioeconomic crisis in the 61-year history of this bank. And the recipes of the past aren't going to make it. So in that regard, we've identified those opportunities of how we can help the region transform, looking at results, measuring results. That's something that also didn't exist here. We didn't have baselines so we can measure the results. We're measuring results. We're measuring that impact, creating that culture, and in so doing, also leaving not only a new presence in the region and a new bank in the region that's focused on new things, but leaving a new institution that's more transparent, that has a greater buy-in from the private sector, that is stronger financially. Hopefully, we'll get that capital increase that's rejuvenated. I always said, every time I do an interview in any country in the region, I always get asked about some infrastructure project and some official, and I hate it. And I said, one of my measures for success is that, by 2025, I will not get asked about some bridge or some highway or some official. Like, I don't want to get asked about any of that stuff. Like, I want, everybody to know what we have done, what we're doing within this new IDB and this new sphere. And I would be remiss, I know that, because you said there was questions about the Caribbean and tourism, in the same way that there should not be, I would prefer infinitely any manufacturing or any type of facility from China in our 26 borrowing nations. I don't think there should be a single call center in India. They should all be in the Caribbean, and that's one way that we can take. And by the way, we're doing a lot. We're doing a lot in that regards. We're doing a lot in that regards. But look, those are our borrowing nations. That's who I work for. I think there's huge opportunities there to diversify, because the Caribbean has gotten really a further burden on all of this, in the sense that their economies have been so concentrated on tourism. And what worse industry for COVID than tourism is obviously with travel and things of the sort. So what are those new opportunities? How we diversify? Look, those call centers are huge. I will personally ask any of you out there, if you have a call center in India, move it to Jamaica, move it to Barbados, move it to the Bahamas, move it to Belize. They speak, beautiful English and can be extraordinarily successful. And you could not find better partners than those countries.
Well, with that, our time is up. I want to thank you for spending this time with us, Mauricio. Your passion and your optimism is contagious. It is wonderful to hear someone in your leadership position with that sense of optimism and, frankly, with that sense of entrepreneurship at the IDB, because that's exactly what you are exhibiting, a level of entrepreneurship and passion that we all need to move this hemisphere forward. And so we congratulate you on your new position. We look forward to working with you, the Council of the Americas, Americas Society, as well as all of our members from around the world. So thank you for your time this morning, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for your partnership, and hopefully I'll see many of you on the 16th.
Ciao. Hasta luego.
Bye-bye. Thank you.